Thank you all very much, and welcome here to the Queen's. Please put it up, is the name. I'm going to guide you through a couple of points first about the topic summit, some information, and talk about the agenda a little bit, and give you lots of other
leicht bewegen, das heißt leicht mitnehmen. Auflassen, muss man nur immer die Hand dran haben, das ist ziemlich leicht passiert. Schau mal, ob du ein bisschen Gefühl dafür kriegst, wenn er sich so leicht bewegt.
If you have a question or if you want to make a comment, we do have microphones to go around. Please wait until the microphone has reached you so that it is actually on the live stream. We're also going to have a local copy of the whole event so that we can actually cut it into videos later on to refresh our YouTube channel with a lot of new content, a lot of exciting content that we have here for the next over the next 2 days. So please be patient and wait for the microphone to arrive. And if you do have any questions, there are two people here that know everything a lot better than I do. One is Ola at the back, and the other one, Nika, her helper, also I think right now outside. Please ask those two ladies. They know everything about the place, where everything is, and where the coffee comes from, and all of that a lot better than I do. I'm just here to read slides. Another big ask, stay green and clean, so please use as little cutlery and plates and things as possible. You can actually reuse them in the European Union. It's not like in the States. It's also totally safe. I've been assured that everyone here is perfectly healthy, so don't worry about that. And last request before I slowly get to the content, tweet and shout. We do have hashtags. The same goes for LinkedIn and Facebook and whatever you guys use. Please tell people about this event, tweet pictures, and let people know that we're here, what we're up to, and what we're all about. That will be tremendously helpful. Then I want to send a big thank you to the 4 sponsor companies, SmartRG, Soft at Home, Intel, and Diopsys, and obviously Ola for actually putting on all of this, organizing the whole event. Ola has been working for, I think, 6 months now on this with all the details and everything, and you can ask her later about all of the change requests that came from me in the last 3 days, and she put all of them on. So maybe we can do a big round of applause for actually getting all of us here to this event. And then, of course, not to forget, the biggest thank you, of course, goes to you, because you actually traveled here. You are here to join the conversation, to take Purple to the next step together with us from the foundation. So obviously, thank you very, very much for making it here this morning. One of the change requests that I want to highlight, just because I'm very, very happy that we made that happen, for those of you who've met me in person, you know that I live and breathe coffee. Food is just a by thing that happens every now and again. So we convinced SmartRG to go the extra step, sponsor a little bit more, and that's why we have Barista Expert out there. It's amazing coffee. I know most of you have tried it already, so it's really, really nice coffee. So please enjoy the coffee and have it enrich your conversations, as I would say. Okay. I did not anticipate that, but you're absolutely right. Okay, so I'll switch gears now and talk a little bit about the Purple Foundation, because we do have some people here that are new, and the Purple Foundation also right now, when you look at our website and the documents that we put out compared to what we had in the past is not so clear. That's one of the big items that we have to solve on the board and organizational side, so I'll just give you a very brief introduction. The one-sentence summary is that we work as Purple to establish a common service ecosystem for ISP customer premise equipment. That is the #1 goal at the moment. That is not the only thing that we do, but that is clearly the focus at the moment, and we do that in various different working groups that I will talk about in a moment. First, I want to talk a little bit about myself, because you have to introduce yourself. I'm Mirko Lindner. Most of you, as I said, will know me. Even more of you will have only heard my voice when I'm on the Purple working group calls and asking people to repeat or to not interrupt each other. That's also me. A little bit about my history. So I started working at OpenMoko in an open source company, and then via some detours ended up at Vodafone, did some fixed-net at Vodafone Mobile and fixed-net TV, then ended up at the Purple Foundation about 12 months ago. That was my full-time job, my day job, so to speak. So I had the pleasure and honor to take what was Purple 1.0 to now Purple 2.0, a lot more focus on ISPs and CPEs. And since July, I work for SmartRG and get to do the Purple stuff, basically sponsored by SmartRG also, just so that you guys know. The first question that always comes up is who is this Purple everyone talks about? And this is a snapshot. This might not be the most accurate, because we do have some membership fluctuation, but it's about 30, 35 companies in and out that join, participate, and drive Purple and take it forward. There are a lot of companies that we're talking to also here in the room who are not yet members or who are not members, but they're definitely close to Purple and part of the Purple ecosystem. And those 35 companies come together to develop open APIs, develop open source, a lot of advocacy, and this event obviously is one of those. And we also target specifically security, as we had a conversation earlier this morning, that it very often gets forgotten or put at the last step in a project development. In terms of activities that the foundation does, I've tried to do a less technical version than the slide that I usually show. The Purple Foundation is focused on everything on the device. Device here being a CPE, so a Wi-Fi router or an internet access device. And we have 2 API sections that we work on above the CPE stack, then the CPE stack itself, where we look at how we can actually contribute to OpenWRT and go out and explain to companies or work with companies how to use OpenWRT in the way it was meant to be used. And then we have, of course, the open source implementation of EasyMesh, Purple Mesh, and then we have the low-level API. You'll hear a lot more details about all of those things over the next 2 days, so I won't go into too much detail. And then that's it for the Purple content. What I wanted to show you next, so that we can get to the first speaker, is the agenda. Just very roughly, you also have it on the back of your badge, printed really in big font, so that we can all read it in the dark. We're going to start today with a welcome. That's you mastered that perfectly. Next, we're going to talk about a service provider's perspective on Purple. Where does the Purple Foundation sit from a service provider perspective? Where can we help as a community? Where should this go? Then we're going to talk about the high-level API. We're going to hear from the Broadband Forum. And after lunch, we're going to have a group of service providers come up. Sorry, it just sounded as if something was going to fall down now. We're going to have a group of service providers come up here, talk a little bit about their open source experience and how they perceive open source communities, what we can do better. Then we're going to hear about Purple WRT, do another nice break. After that, low-level API and a panel of SoC vendors. And last but not least, Purple Mesh and the demo right after. And then the moment we've all been waiting for, dinner and drinks. Obviously not on this agenda. And then I'm going to talk about the second day tomorrow. With that, I want to thank you again for attending. I really wish all of us 2 very interesting days, maybe with a little bit of controversy that we can solve tonight over dinner, and a good start to the next year of Purple. With that, I'll hand it over to our first speaker, Mike Talbert from Verizon. Thank you.
Good morning, Mirko, and good morning, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to be up here with everyone. I think, as Verizon has joined the Purple Adventure, I've got some very directional messages to drive to the community. And as we move forward, please feel free to jump in and interrupt, ask questions, or talk to me at break. We look at this as very opportunistic moving forward. Wi-Fi and internet today, customers, they don't understand or distinguish the difference. All they want to understand is that when they pick up that device, it works robustly, and it starts to move them forward. We've seen the industry for the past 15 years an evolution of routers or a lack of evolution. We see new processors, we see new Wi-Fi, but we really haven't seen any innovation in the industry. The service provider, they take our customers to heart. We look at what's going on, and we're starting to see a little bit of change. But at the end of the day, as we move forward, how do we do this quicker? How do we do this more effectively? How do we bring technology closer to our customers and meet our customer needs? I think that's the big message that we look at. I think probably 2 years ago, as we looked at the change and the way businesses were going and the segmentation even across our business, we saw multiple groups with multiple devices purpose-built, with multiple networks, with multiple business system and operating system services supporting them. And we stepped back and looked at that and said, what are we doing? The customers are very similar, but our ability to service our customers is limited by our ability to engage with our vendors and produce products that actually allow us to move forward. We see segmentation today. In the years past, people were very happy to just get on the internet, but now we have, the younger segment. They go after gaming. Yes. Want me to hold it closer? Thank you. And by the way, the exits are in the back. Please do not rush to get off the airplane. So we see some segmentation moving forward. How do we address that segmentation? We have the younger crowd, we have gamers, we have the older crowd that may be very interested in things like security. We have younger adults that have children that are very interested in things like parental controls. We have the mobile customer or the mobile user that is working from home that's very interested in things like VPN. We have the small business segment that also have different needs. So when we step back into my prior comments, we have purpose-built devices to meet each of these customer needs. It gets very expensive for a service provider to produce these products. The timeline is extended, and the embedded development cycle has been a challenge. I think our common time to market is about 18 months from when we conceive a product to where we engage with the vendor, we develop the software, we develop our internal processes to deploy. In 18 months, technology has passed us by. How do we address this? And so, a couple of years ago, we started to look at this opportunity of modularity. And, what do I mean modularity? The ability to drive services down to a router. Services like parental controls and some other things so that we can customize to the specific customer segment. When we look at the suppliers, and I'm going to be a little tough on you guys today, for me to move from one chipset to another chipset, we lose a lot of software investment. So we start over and over again. How do we keep that software investment across different platforms? Maybe today I use a chipset from company A, tomorrow I use a chipset from company B. Do I have to start over again? That's what we've been doing. So how do we fix some of that? I think the answer is standardization. We see standardization across PCs, we see it across mobile phones, we see it across cloud servers, and that standardization allows us to move very quickly from a deployment perspective. We have not yet seen standardization in CPE. When we look at a home router, probably 80% of the functionality of the home router is consistent across devices. DHCP, we've got DNS, we've got many functions that are common across these products. Yet every time we engage a vendor, guess what we do? We build them again. And what does that vendor do? They go back to the supplier, and they have an implementation that is different across each of the different chipsets. How do we fix that? I think the answers are pretty clear. It's standardization. Can we drive standardization down into the CPE, yet still allow for the innovation needed to drive intellectual property, specific innovation for suppliers and vendors that have things to add that they can do better than the other guy? How do we do that? And so when we step back and we look at Purple is the opportunity that allows us to drive a framework, a standardized framework that will allow us to quickly and easily move between chipsets when we need to, but then also have the flexibility and the modularity to drive customization at the specific customer. We did a proof of concept last year. I built a 10 gig modular router, and we integrated software in 4 months, start to finish. Never ever been done before. And we did it by separating hardware and software, by having that common software base that we could move quickly across different platforms. I got introduced to Purple a month later and said, wow, the vision that Verizon has is consistent with the vision that Purple has. When we look at the components of the next generation home, it's not just the platform, and I understand that Purple is really specific to the platform, the CPE that we're moving forward with. But when we look at a service provider, we have different components that we're going to look at. We have cloud management. We need to understand what's happening with our customers. I struggle with this component every day because today our customers call us up and they tell us that our network is broken. And then we use some of the tools that are available to us to dive in and see what's happening with that customer. Boy, that was yesterday. How do we fix that moving forward? And these are some of the areas that we need to address in Purple as we look at the platform. How do we get more effective in understanding what's happening with our customers so that we can be proactive? The additional area that we look forward at is, Verizon and the vendors that we work with many vendors. So if I have a common vendor that's building my routing platform, yet I have another vendor that's special in security and another vendor that's special in device identification or DPI or intrusion prevention, why can't I bring that vendor code into my device? We attempted to do that a couple of years ago. It took us 18 months to integrate a security solution in our device. 18 months. And that integration was so time-consuming that a bunch of other technology has passed us by. So as we move forward, we need the ability to bring in third-party services and deploy them quickly and effectively. But how do we do that securely? And how do we do that to make sure that we can enhance our customer service, not detach us from our customers? When we start looking at the ability to manage these products and we bring in third-party services, what does that mean? How do we gain telemetry on those additional services? I think we look back at some of the tools that we have brought in for remote management. They're very fixed from an implementation perspective. They take a long time to develop. But now I'm asking to bring in third-party services and understand how they affect our customers day to day so that if there is a problem, I can quickly jump in and help our customer out or even enable our customer to help themselves out. So when we look at the platform based on Purple, we're really talking about containerization. And as I step back and really look at the context of Purple, how we containerize solutions, how we bring them in, I'm not going to tell any of our vendors how to do that. I think we need to be flexible there. Do we use LXC? Do we use Docker? Do we use virtual network functionality? I think every service provider has a vision on how to do this, but I think from a Purple perspective, we want to make sure we abstract that away from us so that we can embellish any solution we need to drive the expectations of the business. When we look at the consumer market space versus the small business market space, we see some separation there. We see virtual network functionality being driven in with VM. sitting on top of LXC, you know, there's some conflict there. If we can step back and abstract that away from the platform, then we can allow for the solution to drive across business segments and now have even a more robust software platform that we can share across our customers. One of the challenges that I look at doing this, and you know, I'm not going to step on some of the other presentations, but how do we manage a platform, the modularity of the platform, the ability to maintain that platform, the ability to drive and orchestrate applications, services, objects, bootloaders? How do we get visibility to how that platform works? These are all things that we're going to need to drive forward as we look at Purple and make sure that that low-level API layer supports that the HAL layer supports it, that we have a hardened platform so that as we bring in these third-party applications, we don't compromise the kernel or compromise the base functionality of the product. Third-party services. Wow. Customer experience. What's the number one important node of the network? And this is probably within the most controversial concept in my company, is because we have a very strong network. But no one understands that the most important node of the network is the one in front of your customer. Why? Because that is where the revenue is being generated from. If you can enhance that customer experience and meet their expectation or exceed their expectation, then you're driving additional revenue. If you're unable to meet that expectation, then your customer goes someplace else. So if you're able to now drive additional services into your customer, it gives you the opportunity to enhance that customer experience, but it also gives you an opportunity to drive additional revenue streams. Additional revenue streams, that's an amazing concept, right? One would think so. Operational support tools. Today we're getting ready to launch 5G fixed wireless. I think the news is already out. We were supposed to announce tomorrow at Mobile World Congress. But we use different remote management tools in that solution versus what we use in our fixed fiber solution. What does that mean? I have to have two different sets of software and two different tracks across a vendor. It gets very difficult to manage and it's not timely. So how about the ability to drop in TR-69 when I need to use it, or drop in OMA-DM when I needed to use that across the different business segments? And as we move forward, how about the ability to drop in NetConf and Yang as a new interface to be able to support it, or USP, or whatever solution I wanted to drop in without having to go through a 6 to 18-month development cycle? How do we keep current with technology? I imagine everyone's heard of CSI, the ability to use Wi-Fi to understand movement in the home. I've been working on that for 5 years, and I've never seen an implementation today, till recently. Why? Because we've been so busy with our embedded development cycle that the implementation of some of this new technology has been very challenging for our vendors to achieve. Now I should be able to go out to a vendor with this technology and drop it into the box and add it as a service. Care for the elderly, understanding movement, understanding when people fall. We've been unable to achieve some of these goals because the embedded development cycle has not been consistent for us. It's been difficult. The discipline of software development, I apologize, has not been held very well. We look at the deployment cycle, the test cycle has been very challenging. How do we fix some of that? You know, and I think the answer is, and what I'm up here to say is, I think the answer is with Purple. But it means that we have a lot of work in front of us. It means that we need to have that kernel hardened, but we need to have an abstraction layer where we can drop in these services and not be compromised moving forward. How do we get there? You know, this is the big question, and I see we have a number of service providers in the room and a ton of vendors and suppliers, and I appreciate everyone coming here. This is an ask out to the entire organization. How do we get together and drive a common platform that we can share across service providers and MSOs alike so that we can mitigate the impact to our suppliers? Today, when we look at the Broadcoms and the Qualcomms and and the other suppliers are out there, and I apologize if I miss anyone along the way. But they're developing code specific to Verizon, specific to Vodafone, specific to British Telecom, and a plethora of other small suppliers. Well, how about if we brought that together and offered a common interface for them? Wow, it would help them out. And this has been a challenge to bring the suppliers into the conversation because they don't see the benefit of scale and growth that we're looking for, time to market that we're looking for. Standards efforts are not new for operators. We've been with the Broadband Forum for many years. OpenWRT, I think we embellished. The Wi-Fi Alliance has been out there. We see some of these groups a little bit lethargic moving forward, yet we want to tie ourselves to standards. When I look at prpl and the ability to instantiate some of these standards, we see gaps in what a service provider is looking for versus what a potential retail industry has already been developed. Areas, for example, in Easy Mesh that is a very good dream, but the difference between where we are today and where we need to be tomorrow, there's a gap. How do we fill that gap? Well, we get together collaboratively, we develop white papers, we develop new standards or new ideas and concepts, and we drop them back into these standards groups. We do some of the work for them so that we can meet the objective of the service provider and having a carrier-grade product moving forward. I don't see another method. I can't wait a couple years for Easy Mesh to become service provider compliant. I can't wait for some of the other remote management standards to be in place before I move forward with a modular approach. I can't wait for orchestration to include telemetry and metadata to ensure compliance from a construct in a platform. So we're kind of in an interesting area here with prpl where we can do some of that definition and drive the industry forward, drop some of these items back into these standards organizations so that we can all take advantage of them and become more effective, have increased scale, and drive better customer service, additional revenue, reduce operational expense, and have scale and agility. So I stop there and open up for a few questions from the floor. Anyone? Well, either I did a very good job or everyone is still sleeping. Yes, Mirko.
Kann ich wieder? Great. Thank you very much for your insight there. My first question, and sorry for putting you on the spot as the first speaker there. If you project yourself 12 months into the future, what's the title of your presentation at the next prpl Summit? What's the dream title?
So I think this is going to come up a little bit later in the day, but I want to step in a little bit and answer your question. I think it's a perfect question. So we've had a vision for a couple of years of modularity. We've had a vision of a couple of years of moving to a customer-based product and really embellishing the customer and driving that better experience. When we look at the lethargic nature of standards, and by nature they are lethargic, how do we achieve our objective yet still meet our goals as Verizon? And I think the answer is that we move forward directionally with modularity. We collaborate with our peers on how to do this, and we make sure that the collaboration has alignment, and then we take that information and we drop it back into prpl and drop it into the other standards organizations so that we achieve standardization. I want to launch a product mid-2020, and if I look today at our progress, we're making good progress, but we're not making progress fast enough. Okay. So I think what will happen is we will push forward and we will come back and contribute so that the standards are driven forward. What I don't want to do is I don't want to be that bull in the China shop. I don't want to be the Verizon that comes in and says, hey, guess what? We're going to do it the Verizon way or we're not going to do it anyway. And I think that's a very important message when we talk about open, is that we want to be open about this directionally. I don't want to do it by myself. I want to do it with the group so that we're aligned, so that we can maintain that moving forward. So in direct answer to your question, I think in 12 months we're going to come back and say, hey, guess what? We just launched a product and it's sitting on top of Purple Framework. And guess what? We just contributed all that IP back to the foundation so that everyone can take advantage of it. And I think that's how we start moving things along at a quicker pace.
Yeah, that's an awesome goal. I think we can all agree that that would be quite a success. And now we have a question, so I get the...
Hi, Wojtek Makowski, Sovtatom. My question is the following. Imagine that in some point in time we'll have the Purple framework available. The business model for hardware manufacturers will be roughly the same as today. They will continue selling boxes. There will be a business model for those proposing the additional services as applications. But the companies that need to maintain this common framework to evolve it, etc., what is the future business model for them that you see?
Well, so I can only talk from a Verizon perspective, and that was a very good question. The change in the model and the business model, I believe, is going to be separation of hardware and software. And that separation of software is going to be more extensive than that. Today, as we work with OEMs and ODMs alike, I reach out and I define a product and they build a product for us and they develop, an operating system on top of an SDK or an RDK or a BDK, depending on which form they're moving forward. And then we go through an extensive integration and test cycle, and then sometime down the road we are able to launch a product. I think that business model has to change for us to be agile. I want to be able to go to an ODM and spec out a piece of hardware, and I want to work with 1, 2, 3 vendors to develop that framework, and I want to work with all the rest of the vendors to bring in third-party services so that I can drive a very flexible product moving forward. That's different than we do things today. It's a big change, and I think it's going to take a lot of work for us to have a framework that's able to be that agile. But that's really where we need to be. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Not completely. I fully agree on the vision. The question is, where the money will come from. For hardware manufacturers, it's obvious. For additional services providers, it looks quite straightforward too. And then for this common open source framework, you know very well that nothing is done, for free. So somewhere there must be a model that enables companies to contribute and to continue their business. So that's a kind of question that many companies ask. And my company.
This has been difficult for some companies to understand. Most companies, most OEMs today are out there providing a piece of hardware and a platform and integration services. What happens when I go to an OEM and say, hey, guess what? I just need software. And they step back and they say, well, that's not our business model. So, well, business is changing. The future is changing. So how do we do that when we go to ODMs and now ask specifically for a manufacturer piece of hardware and an open bootloader or a Verizon bootloader so that I can move quickly between vendors? Because I don't want to be tied to a vendor. I don't want to be tied to a vendor not because the vendor has not done a good job, but I don't want to be tied to a vendor because I need breadth of services. And a lot of OEMs today will say, you know what, we've got that security solution and we've got that parental control solution. We've got that DPI solution. We've got, XYZ. But I look at the industry and I see third-party suppliers potentially having better solutions. It's around customer choice. One of the things that is moving very quickly in the United States is far-field voice or assistance. Google Assistant, Alexa, Siri. So if I were to produce a product today that had an Alexa integration on it and you were in a Google Home, I've just alienated a customer. Well, how about the model where, guess what? I can drop in whichever assistant that I need to depending on customer selection, because that's what the customers are looking to do. That's new, and it's a change in business. If we talk to the Googles of the world, they say, well, guess what? It's Google, it's the Google way or the highway. When we talk to the Amazons say, oh, it's Alexa or nothing. Well, guess what? We see today the home has Alexa, has Google, has Siri, has Cortana, has Bixby. Why are we limiting the solution? You know, I'm a security guy for a very long time, and the security solution that we spent 18 months implementing is not the selection that I would use. I want to use something else. So I'm going to go buy a router from someplace else. That is not what the service provider wants. They want to allow the selection available to the customer or specifically to the service. And so, you know, I'm dancing a little bit around your question. It's a change. It's a change that we're going to need to move forward with. It is different, and we are getting some pushback from some of our suppliers. It's like, wow, we don't embellish that business model. Well, maybe we need to look for new suppliers. But I think by seeing the amount of suppliers and vendors that are coming to the summit this year, we see some interest there. And as we look at the industry from a service provider perspective, I think our message today is it's time to get on board. It's time to be part of the solution so that we can scale, so that we can drive agility to our customer base. We haven't seen that in the past. We've been limited. And when we look at the time to market for our products, when we look at the retail industry and dropping a new router in every 6 months, how do we keep timely with the market out there? And I see this as an avenue to get there. I haven't seen this model anywhere else, and I struggle with embedded development cycle. So, you know, my ask back to the other service providers is let's get together and collaborate, and let's make sure that we're aligned so that we drive a consistent message to our suppliers and our vendors. Let's go back to the standards groups and some of the Spark guys, and I see Mr. Crispin in the audience today. You know, we need some help from OpenWRT in order for us to get there, because we're going to ask for some additional things, but we want it to sit on top of a standards-based or an open solution. We're going to go to the broadband forum and say, hey, some of the things you're doing were good yesterday. How do we get there tomorrow? And guess what? A common message from the service providers is going to drive a message back to the standards teams that they need to be quicker moving forward. You know, the Wi-Fi Alliance and EasyMesh, I think, you know, we're ready to jump in on EasyMesh, version 14 or something like that, right? Where we get security, where we get enough telemetry to really effectively manage the customer. Well, R3 is timed out for 2021. You heard me talk about launching a product next year. What does that mean? Well, maybe that means with Purple Mesh, we take Purple Mesh and drive some of those deltas, understand what those deltas are, make sure that the group understands those deltas and we're aligned with those deltas, and we drop that back into the alliance and help them move along a little bit quicker. I'm not sure, again, I answered your question, but...
We have
yes, sir.
Other questions here.
Good morning,
here's
Mike.
where the guy comes in and heckles me. Okay.
Well, yeah, this is. So my name is Randy Zimler. I'm also new to the Purple work efforts here, and listening to you, Mike, we've had some conversations. But adding on, you reflected on a couple topics. Some at the beginning of where you were speaking with regards to the Purple infrastructure at the CPE level, but then, to a certain extent, what I think we need to also think about is the cloud. So considering that Purple is as a foundation physical at this point, maybe there needs to be consideration on something called the Purple Cloud. And where I mean from that, and extending on your conversation, are there ways then that third-party service providers could leverage a purplish cloud to be able to interface and integrate down to the Purple layer at the CPE? So there's nothing that's definitive of how that would work, but just as a concept where you think that might fit into the whole Purple foundation framework.
That's a great question, and last year I talked a little bit about Purple Mesh, and I thought that we needed to really rename Purple Mesh to Purple Haze. For anyone with a few years, maybe they understand that joke. But you're right on topic in the fact that as we develop this platform, Verizon and other service providers spend a lot of time on developing that interface into the cloud. How do we bring in the cloud components, whether that's for lifecycle management, whether that's for the orchestration of objects, third-party applications? How do we develop that interface when I look today at an organization that is just getting off the ground in getting the platform defined? The integration between the cloud and the home needs to be very crisp, and I think we need to bring in Purple Cloud, or however you would like to define it, into the organization and have some effort done there. If we can drive that common interface, and I can take the router from yesterday and the router from tomorrow and mitigate the amount of work for integration into OSS and BSS, that's a fantastic idea. We spend many months in doing that integration effort, so having a common interface at the top is important. I think we need to bring that into the Purple Foundation, but I think we need to be very cautious in doing so. I think if we get alignment between service providers and we understand what those cloud interfaces need to be, then we can make sure that the high-level and low-level API documents support what our objectives are, so we understand where we need to get to, where we are today, what those deltas are, and drive that forward. But again, that is new territory here, and something that I think as an organization we need to embellish. Thank you.
Hi, Mike. Olaf Wachendorf, Intel. So I think, we are largely aligned on your targets. Standard APIs and open source. Just one specific question on what you said before, how we get there. So if I understood you correctly, you said due to your time to market, you will go ahead, develop your solution, and then contribute back. So let's just extrapolate what will happen. So if operator A, B, and C do exactly the same approach, after you have your solution, we have, again, 3 or whatever, n implementations, right? How do we converge? Shouldn't the way forward be that the operators agree now how to do it, and then bring the resources into Purple to develop one solution, right? And not n solutions again. So I think we need to understand the mechanics, how to work towards an open source implementation.
So when you say one solution, how I develop a product versus someone in another service provider, that their solution may be very different. But I think what we're talking about is having a framework that allows for a consistent implementation.
But we still need to get to this framework, right? It's clear the differentiating parts every operator needs to develop it on its own, right? But to get the framework done, how can we get there if everyone walks away with developing its own framework? We need to have now Purple to get everyone aligned to develop one framework, right? How do we solve that?
So no argument, and I think, as I have spoken with the group, when we look at the definition, the product statement, I think we're missing clear definition from a product perspective. We see a lot of work going on in the technical and the working groups, but if we can define that product or that product vision and have alignment there between the service providers and MSOs that are part of the foundation, then that drives a clear message into the working group and technical teams of where we need to get to. Right? Now, how the implementation happens, and probably a good discussion point would be OBMap as an example. Topology, we see a gap of understanding topology. What does topology mean to me? What does topology mean to you? May be very different, right? So objectively, if we can come together and align with that question, then we understand directionally where we need to go to, and we can now define the path moving forward.
But will we do that together in Purple, or will operators walk off and then contribute and drop in what they have developed? I think that's the essential question for me.
I think those are some things that we're going to need to work out and figure out along the way. I don't have any specific answers, but I do know that standards are not in keeping swift enough with where we need to get to. And part of my objective is to make sure that from a framework perspective, we're consistent, right? And if we can stay consistent there, we offer an opportunity for suppliers to take advantage of that, right? And that will allow them to focus more on our energy. It also means that the group, the service provider group that is part of Purple needs to be more robust. In a, Verizon, outside of Purple, we host a weekly meeting to try and bring additional service providers in to drive that collaboration. Otherwise, if I'm going left and someone else is going right, we're never going to get to our goal. And I think I see that as part of our challenge in standards, is we bring in these big, large organizations and we sit inside a room and, Mike has his agenda and Evgeny has his agenda and Olaf, you may have your agenda. And so then we conjecture around it and we don't make progress. I think my objective is to step back a little bit and get better alignment up front and then drive collaboratively submissions into the organizations so that we don't have that constant churn. And again, it's a thought, it's a vision, it's not a process yet, but I think that's where we need to get to really move forward in an agile methodology.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today and giving me the opportunity to present. Look forward to speaking with everyone much later. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I can hear myself again. Thank you very much, Mike, for that, for opening us up, and thank you very much for all the questions. I think you already, you can already feel some of the important topics that we're trying to address here over the next 2 days. And Mike already took some of the points that I had for the very last talk of the conference. So I'll have to rewrite all of those slides now. Thank you very much. But we all know slides are made 5 minutes before the presentation, so everything else is legacy by the time we read it. So that's okay. If you look at your schedules, the next thing is more coffee, which I definitely will embrace. And we will reconvene here at, let me check, it says 10:45, I think. Yeah, so we now have half an hour to continue the conversation and also look forward, and it allows me to add some slides to this presentation, and then we'll all see you back at 10:45. Thank you very much.